McGowan, who is in Atlanta as we speak. So let's go through the announcement thingies. Welcome to Parenting Beyond Belief, which is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin. I'm reading, of course, from the Noah's Ark book. An educational nonprofit dedicated to the separation of government and religion and the promotion of positive atheist culture. Today's hosts are, as I mentioned previously, Dale McGowan, who has authored and edited many great books, including the gold standard secular parenting books, Parenting Beyond Belief and Raising Free Thinkers. We also have with us today Janet Heimlich, who has authored a book also that has to do with parenting, although it's not quite the happy book. It's about religious child maltreatment. Sorry, I have not had enough coffee, I believe.
You can just say religious child abuse and neglect pretty much covers it.
Does that cover it? It's all, yeah. And she is also the founder of the Child Friendly Faith Project. So she's pretty awesome. And then there's me, who I have to go back and forth in the book because, complicated. I am on the Atheist Community of Austin's board, and I am president of Foundation Beyond Belief, and I'm just also known as the blue-haired, highly educated lecture lady, which I just adore. I want that on my gravestone, everybody, just so you know. Let's see. I want to thank, just in case I forget, Philip Gunther for the wonderful introduction that he created for us. The butterfly flying in through the lovely fields, it makes me deliriously happy every time I see it. Thank you so much, Gunther. Mr. Gunther, I really, really appreciate that. And I know it's before the show is over, but I want to send out a special thank you to Mark, the producer of this show, because he got everything set up solo and his ankle is twisted. And I am so sorry I was disorganized. We finally got it together. None of you know anything because Mark is so freaking good. We are just up and running. Yay. Okay, so there's all that. Also, if you would like to support what we do on Patreon, we have a Patreon page, and there is an ACA Productions Facebook group where you can go in, and Parenting Beyond Belief is one of the groups that's on that. What else am I forgetting? Pretty soon, not yet, but pretty soon you will be able to buy this really spiffy Parenting Beyond Belief coffee mug. I am lucky enough to have one ahead of time.
And I'm envious as I speak. I kind of thought a co-host Benny would be.
Ah, dang it.
I like this mug. It's really good.
If you've been good, Santa Claus or somebody might bring you something if you're really, really good.
There's a piece of coal in here. What?
What? That is just wrong. Alrighty, so Thanksgiving is coming up, and so one of the things that I want to talk about is everything surrounding that has to do with being secular and people who prefer reason and truth. So did anybody want to start on that? Because I know we all three, when it was proposed, had very strong, yes, we need to cover that reactions. Who wants to start in on that?
What about Dale?
Dale? You interested?
Hey, sure. You hearing me okay?
Yep.
I love Thanksgiving, and actually my kids have told me that it's their favorite holiday.
You might need to put your mouth a little closer to the receptacle thingy.
Okay.
Sorry.
How's that?
Much better.
That's great.
Good.
Why is it your child's favorite holiday?
Why is it your child's favorite holiday? Okay.
They have said that it is, Thanksgiving is something they prefer over Christmas, over their birthdays. One of the things they said is it's a no pressure holiday.
Right on.
You don't have the pressure of getting gifts or all the other things that go along with Christmas. There's this additional stuff in addition to the positive. And it's just a time when you get to see people that you haven't seen in a while, and you get together for a really great meal.
Yeah.
And it's fall, which is our favorite season. And we have a tradition that we do some years that I just love, which is a gratitude tradition. And instead of saying, there's the idea of thanking people who really brought the meal to us, the people who cooked the meal, the farmers who raised the crops and so on. But we had started a tradition about 10 years ago of going around the table and actually thanking someone else at the table.
Ooh.
For something that happened during that year, something that was meaningful. So when we first moved to Atlanta, for example, we were able to specifically thank my in-laws, who had just done a tremendous amount for our family to help us in the transition. And then it's their turn, and they thank someone else at the table for something specific. So it's very specific. And the other rule is that when somebody thanks you, all you can say is, "You're welcome."
Ooh.
You say, "Oh, it was nothing. No, it's no big deal. Well, don't thank me for that." A lot of people were involved. You just say thank you, or you just say you're welcome. And by the time you go all the way around, the good feeling, the absolutely wonderful feeling that you get from everyone around the table having thanked someone specifically for something that happened during that year is a really terrific tradition.
I'm going to steal that. Totally stealing that. We're going to have Thanksgiving at my house. We usually travel. We do all sorts of different things for Thanksgiving, but this year we're having it at my house. And we're doing my favorite thing, which is to invite people over who don't have family. And so we're having quite a number of people over, and I'm looking forward to that very much because it's all people that you choose to be with. And they're all dear friends, and they're all bringing delicious food. They're all wonderful cooks, so I get to sit back and say, well, I hosted, so you bring the food. It's all good. And I love Thanksgiving, too. It's also my husband's birthday, so it always falls right around Thanksgiving. So he's always a very happy camper because he loves food and the happiness of birthday gifts and all that stuff. So Thanksgiving for us and our house is also a very happy thing. And then there's the other aspect of Thanksgiving, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Hearing both of your stories makes me feel very grateful for my mother, she passed away a few years ago. Sorry, there. But one thing that she did when we would all get together for Thanksgiving, which as a child I remember feeling really, really embarrassed by, but looking back, it was such a wonderful thing. She would have everyone at the table hold hands and then go around, and very similar to what Dale was saying, just say something that they were grateful for in the last year or whatever people felt like saying. And my family was basically secular Jewish, so, there was never any kind of prayers going on or grace or that kind of thing. But that was kind of the ritual she started. And then what was it that you were just saying about your experience? Because it was, inviting people that don't have somewhere to go. My mother also would have what I call these orphan Thanksgivings.
That's the word I use too, orphan.
And there was
probably not.
I mean, it probably was up to 12 or 15 people around the table. Mm-hmm. Most of them really had no one to spend Thanksgiving with. Mm-hmm. I mean, and you talk about a motley crew.
Yeah.
It was really special in that way that, she was so generous, in that way and thinking of other people. I do want to say, though, that the fact that it's not a no-pressure holiday for a lot of people, especially women that take it upon themselves to have to feel like they have to perform and, cook these elaborate meals and do all the work on themselves. I think what more people are doing now are having Thanksgiving potlucks, which make a lot more sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's another benefit of having lots of people from all over your world bringing their favorite dish is everybody gets to try something amazing, and the meal is not dependent upon one person performing, because yes, I totally get that. I've done that before. It can be a joy to provide delicious food for people, and if you're that person, good on you. But for some of us, cooking is a little stressful, and making sure everything is perfect can be stressful. So yeah, there is that aspect of it. Another aspect of it is that we're looking at it very much from a place of privilege. Some folks don't have anybody or anywhere to go. There's that extreme. And there's the fact that what we think Thanksgiving isn't. It really wasn't a coming together of peoples to celebrate a bountiful whatever. What happened in those times was not good for the Native peoples. We took advantage in so many ways. And I imagine for most Native Americans, Thanksgiving is something of a, what would be the right word, gang?
I mean, I think a lot of it is as propaganda.
Well, yeah, America.
What we were
Yeah, right.
told for years and years growing up.
I imagine that they view it as just one more like stab to their personhood, their culture.
Exploitive is probably
Exploitive, yeah. It's dishonest. It's like Columbus Day to me. At least it feels like that, and that's something to be conscious of. And in that same vein, I don't know about you all, but in my house, we read to the kids at one time when they were old enough the Little House on the Prairie series. Wonderful book and set of books. And what was wonderful about it for me and us, because we are that family, is there were so many teachable moments in these books. It wants to be the story of the family that triumphed over the wild, wild West and so forth. We're not just triumphing over the wild where nothing was. This was somebody's place. This was somebody's land, not in the sense that we look at it, but they lived there, and we just took it all. And especially in the South, not only did we take it, we forced them off and made them walk horrendous distances to places where they didn't want to be and treated them horribly all the way there. We then cleared that land and made people who had been enslaved grow cotton for us. It's our history has been very sanitized for school, and I am glad that I live in a time when we are starting to reevaluate and look at it more fairly. The notion that being PC is ridiculous, no, it's not. If you think PC is being ridiculous, you need to reconsider how things look from somebody else's point of view.
I think it's always important to take a little time and look at the historical, the reality of what actually did take place that led up to us now performing rituals and celebrating holidays and things like that. And then, once we understand where it came from, we can then decide, well, what aspects of it do we want to hold on to and focus on and make the centerpiece of our events and gatherings and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important too when we're raising kids, that we make sure that we're not continuing the propaganda, and that and now I think that things are very different in schools than certainly when I was growing up. I think that and I'm just speaking on my experience hearing about my daughter's school and what they do to celebrate Thanksgiving and that kind of thing. And but I like to think that there is more awareness, at least culturally, as to the origin of the holiday.
Yeah, just thoughtfulness. And Thanksgiving, there's no greater time to be thoughtful. I remember a specific part in one of the books, I'm sorry, I don't remember which one, where Ma talks about, the mother talks about the natives being brutes and horrible and so forth. And that's just so white-centered, Eurocentric, because,
it's a convenient interpretation of history.
If you look at it from the person's point of view who's standing there and you're taking things over and shooting people and so forth, yeah, I would not respond kindly. So
if we're going to express gratitude at Thanksgiving, we should all express gratitude to the Native people that had this country and what they did for us. Hopefully, we can do better to preserve their culture and empower them. But I do feel grateful to those people, and shame for so much that was so much genocide that took place against them, against African Americans, and then against the Japanese with internment. So we do have to really take a look at our mistakes and terrible decisions that we've made.
Yeah.
Dale, do you want to add to this kind of intense discussion?
No, I think you're covering it very well.
Okay.
It's sad. I mean, I think whenever a holiday is just all happy, and it's just, and everyone feels compelled to make it very happy. We talked about going around the table, and, it shouldn't be a pressure thing, and kids need to feel like it's okay for them to feel sad about this stuff. And if they don't feel like expressing gratitude, that's okay. And so just having it be a lovely time as people come together and just celebrating people coming together, I think is a great way to celebrate Thanksgiving.
Right. Awareness, thoughtfulness, and then do something about it. I know our family is doing some specific things this holiday season that we hope will be thoughtful for folks who don't have like we do. So consider that if you can, if you're in a place to do that. Okay. Oops, we had a caller, but we lost them. Sad. Okay. I had a graphic that I sent Mark, I think, a couple days ago, but I didn't hear back if he actually got it. Mark, do you have that graphic by any chance? We could start with our game called Spot the Difference. Do you have it? Okay, it was, I sent it in a thing, but it didn't make it through. Okay, so I can just tell you what the graphic says, I think. Well, it was a list of, it was a graphic that I gave you quite a while ago, Mark, that covered, it was the Spot the Difference game. There were lots of religious sayings.
I have an idea for something we could do while we're waiting for Mark to pull it up.
You go, girl.
I'm wondering if each of us could briefly tell an anecdote of something that took place in our growing up and celebrating Thanksgiving that we took away as a child, something that had some meaning for us, whatever that might be.
I would have to think about that. I would really have to think about that. You have something? It sounds like your mom left a rich.
She did, yeah. Well, I do remember those dinners really well. And after a while, when I was really just home for holidays after I'd gone to college, I would come home, and there was something I loved about us all getting the table ready. That was, a big part of it. And it was always so beautiful. You don't always have to have fine china and silver and that kind of thing. I think a set table that is so welcoming, it's, anticipating, lovely times with people coming together to enjoy a meal. And so I remember really loving helping out with getting the table set. And I didn't really have much to do with the cooking. And I still don't have much to do with cooking, as you can gather. Potluck. But as the meal came together more and more, and things started to smell better and better, and then people came in with gifts and that kind of thing. I mean, it was a really special time. And I was, as I grew up older and older, I became more and more aware of, sometimes my mother would invite a pastor or someone who was either a religious leader or someone of faith, and I appreciated how she handled those kinds of things too. I think by making it a democratic type of process where each person could talk about what they were grateful for and that kind of thing, it allowed individuals who wanted to speak about their gratitude in a spiritual way, they could do that, but it wasn't like we all had to partake in it.
And
there was
nobody
no
was
bowing of the heads. There was no forced anything.
Right.
So
Good.
it became more of an individualistic expression.
Which is so respectful and good. I love that.
Yeah. Because my mother really was someone who could reach out and feel comfortable with and communicate with all different kinds of people.
I wish I knew her. She sounds amazing.
She really was amazing. And now when I think about how people are just so, I'm in my own little bubble now, and but she had some kind of strength to just be so inclusive, even to people that, I remember kind of looking down on even when I was younger, sitting there at the table because, I probably didn't have they didn't have all the advantages I did, and I hadn't developed my sense of compassion to the point where I could really appreciate that. So I do now, looking back.
Right.
Even if I didn't do it then.
That's beautiful. That's just beautiful. I am just flat out envious. We have a caller, so we'll do the caller and then come back for another story of that sort of thing. All right. And I don't have a screener thingy, so it's going to be potluck. Hi. You're on with Claire, Janet, and Dale. Who am I speaking to? Hello?
Hello?
Hello. Hi.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. It didn't make a clicky noise.
It's okay, Janet. I recognize your voice. Hi.
Yeah.
How are you?
How you guys doing? I'm good. I wanted to call and to talk to you guys about something that comes up pretty often with actually other atheists, and I find it kind of odd. So I wanted to pose the question to you and see what your thoughts are of ways to respond. So I don't know. I first came across this probably about a year ago where someone said that they were forced to go to church, and they made a joke that they pinched their baby to make the baby cry so that they would get so they could leave. And my immediate thing was, horror that you would, pinch a child to leave church.
God.
And I mean, they made the joke, but then what happened in the discussion was a lot of people, a overwhelming amount of people saying that it's okay to, put your hands on a child. It doesn't do any harm. It happened to them. They were, they turned out okay. And it's just,
Sorry.
Okay, so then, of course, we list the science, behind how it's damaging. And, we're supposed to be skeptics, And I find it really odd that we're so willing to demand evidence and say, we stand behind logic and reason when it comes to a God belief, but we reject it when it gets closer to home. So I guess my question to you guys is, what can we say besides providing the science, which, absolutely demonstrates that it's harmful? What else can we do when we encounter these people, whether believers, or atheists, because it seems to be run the gamut, that think it's okay to physically punish their child?
It's an excellent question. In fact, I think in a month we're going to do a special thing on that very thing, but it bears repeating. So, Dale, would you like to take a crack at starting this one off?
Sure. I don't really know what I can offer in terms of, beyond the science, because the science is settled. This is not a question where we're still waiting for the evidence to come in. There have been not only studies done, but some really terrific meta-analyses of those studies that looked at the variables in terms of the impact on the child. One of the really classic meta-analyses was done by a researcher named Elizabeth Grosskopf at Columbia.
She's now actually at University, UT here in Austin.
She is, okay. So she was at Columbia years ago, I guess, and now she's at, that's terrific. Good for you guys. Yeah. But she's one of the foremost advocates for getting the science right on corporal punishment. And she did a meta-analysis of 88 studies on corporal punishment and determined that there are 11. This is not exactly answering your question. You already know the science, but this is all I've got, is the science, which is solid.
No, I can always use more science, because the more science it throws, the less they can defend.
Right.
All right, so here's the thing. They determined from the meta-analysis that there are 11 direct measurable influences on the child from corporal punishment. 11 things that are increased by corporal punishment. 10 of them are negative. A higher likelihood of depression, a higher likelihood of violent behavior, a higher likelihood that they will beat their own children, a damaged parent-child relationship. These are not, the jury's not out on these things. The only thing that had what they called a positive correlation was immediate compliance. So whatever it is you're whacking the child about, they will stop doing or start doing or whatever it is you're trying to do. And in the process, you're going to get these 10 negative lifelong consequences. So, I mean, really, I think it could be that we have to spell it out more specifically, more that when we say in general that the science is settled, maybe that doesn't reach people. But when you start to say words like a lifelong, a higher lifelong tendency toward depression and anxiety, that might start to get people's attention. I don't know, but it's the sort of thing that other countries, a lot of Scandinavian countries now, there is, a national level prohibition on corporal punishment, an increasing number of states, which is really encouraging. I believe I'm in Georgia, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it is still technically permissible to have corporal punishment in the schools.
It is true, actually, across most of the Bible Belt states.
Yeah,
and she would know.
As long as you can sign up, quote unquote, to allow it.
Good Lord.
Yeah,
right.
or it's an exceptional thing where you sign up to say, I don't.
Where you opt out, right? Yeah.
Right. So really, that's the best I have to offer.
The science is overwhelming, and if I could just add one more study, which might have more of impact on the people you're speaking with, Janet.
And then me too.
There's one study fairly recent that in particular shows that children who were, and I don't like to use the word spank because it just sounds so innocuous, but children who were physically punished, when they grow up, it has been shown there's a strong correlation between physical punishment and serious sexual problems. Somehow, when people hear that, that's when they really want to take a double take. So that's one particular study that's worth remembering. I also like to point out, and this is the last thing I'll say on the science, is that of all of the studies that have been done, because oftentimes you'll talk to people who will say, "Oh, I was spanked and I feel I turned out fine."
They always say that every time,
as if fine is a great indicator of a happy kid. But I have yet to come across one study that showed that physical punishment enhances the well-being of children. We can say that maybe it corrects behavior quickly due to fear, of course, but most of...
and that's what I usually say, is like, it's like you're governing by fear. I was like, is that really what you want to teach your child? That scaring someone into doing what you want them to do is the way to go.
Yeah. So
and also that they're indoctrinated into believing that this is just because that happened to them and they think that they had a fairly happy childhood, that makes it okay. That they were indoctrinated into this belief that physically punishing a child is okay.
I think it's important to get into the psychological component like you're doing. and that's where I was going to go next, that whether someone was physically punished due to some kind of religious doctrine in their community, or whether it was a secular household, whatever it was, it is very difficult for people who were raised by people that they loved or love, and then to have to say that their loved ones made mistakes. It shouldn't be such a huge mountain to climb. But when someone was raised with physical punishment, very often it's really difficult for them to just kind of, get up over that hill and then say, wait a minute, my parents didn't do everything right. They didn't do everything perfectly. And no, they may not be able to pinpoint, well, this is how I was harmed specifically. But when you're talking to folks like that, you may want to just ask them about their childhoods and say, what was it like when you got a spanking? What was that experience like? And here's one thing that I think most people don't focus on enough. And they want to talk very often about the physical potential abusive aspects of physical punishment. The emotional impact of physical punishment is long lasting, and I think that usually will kind of trigger some things.
I've asked a little bit about that, and usually the response, again, going back to this one specific incident that happened not too long ago, the response was that, one, they deserved it because they had done something wrong. That was an overwhelming response. And then two, that they felt that the parent was justified because they needed to, learn the lesson.
Okay, this is where, go ahead, and when you're finished.
So I felt like they were, again, indoctrinated into thinking that this was the way that it should be, and they are rejecting all of the evidence that was, put up to say, that you shouldn't go that route. Yeah. And it's just a weird dynamic to me. And I guess one of my main things was that I kind of had a little bit of difficulty replying to, because, usually I would just list the science, right? But they're like, how do you, what was your suggestion? I'm like, a big thing you can do is talk to your child. It's lazy parenting to hit a child.
It is lazy parenting, yeah.
Yeah, it's lazy parenting. So if you want your child to do something or not to do something, the best way to accomplish that is talking. And their immediate reaction was, how do you reason with a toddler? Well, sometimes you can't reason with a toddler, but that doesn't mean that you resort to lazy parenting. So I guess, what is your recommendation then for, especially like terrible twos and threes, when they're maybe a little bit less open to listening to mom and dad when they're in the midst of something? What do you advise as a way to control the situation? And I know that's going to be varied by child, by the way, but just in general.
Right. I want to zip up what we just were talking about first and then address that one. And that is when people say, well, I turned out fine. If they are a person of reason, the first thing I point out is that, would you accept anecdotal data for anything else?
Good point.
You probably wouldn't, right? And
no.
Yeah. And you might get compliance right away, but is it worth the risk of the other 10 things?
Right.
And like
I really
you said,
need to find that study, so I'll look it up after.
Right. It's excellent. It's one of the things we were going to do. But is talking to your child, and again, we'll get to how you speak appropriately to various ages. And what Janet said, I want to dovetail on that. When the person was young and they were punished physically, how did that feel? Wouldn't you have rather, in that instance, your parent had taken you aside, no matter the age, and explain in terms that you can understand that this was not a good thing and why? I mean, at the very, very least, a small child will say, you can say to them, I am trying to keep you safe, and the safe thing is for you to do X. And if you do it again, you could get hurt and so on. But now to how to speak to the very various ages, like the very youngest age. Anything to add,
I was going to suggest a book. A big obstacle that you're running into with these folks is that they don't know much about child development. I guarantee you, if they did learn about it, even in a most basic way, I think that their viewpoints would change. I don't have a long list, but I can just tell you one book that I think really helps. It's not an anti-spanking book or anything. It's called The Happiest Toddler on the Block.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And it specifically guides parents who want to find a way to communicate with a toddler who is being difficult, who's having a tantrum, who's just crying, and they don't know how to stop the crying. The other thing I would say is I would love for our culture to move away from this idea that parenting requires of children that they become compliant and obedient.
Right.
If our culture, and I know that this is getting to a larger point than what you called about, but if folks could appreciate that parenting really is about raising children so that they are fulfilled and content individuals and have positive feelings about themselves and the world around them, and how to negotiate with our world, including learning how to be respectful towards others and all those important things we want them to learn, as opposed to I'm here, I'm responsible for this other person to act a certain way.
Right.
So you'll know.
We expect sometimes for a toddler to be able to control their emotions as if they were an adult.
Yeah.
And even adults don't do such a good job sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you're exactly right. We put so much expectations on them to do this.
And child development experts now are all talking about getting away from this idea of punishment as a way to teach children. So not just physical punishment, but punishment. To not include punishment at all in the raising of children.
Yeah, and one of the elements of that is often left out of the discussion is parental disapproval is a very powerful thing especially for the youngest children. And if you have been following attachment parenting from the beginning, if you have been properly attached to your child emotionally, and they've got that strong relationship with the parent, then parental approval and disapproval is every bit as strong, every bit as powerful to the child as physical punishment. So don't underestimate that as a tool as well.
It is to an animal even. I was going to add just one last thing, if I may. It has been shown that the most effective way to teach children respectful behavior, I try to get away from the word good and bad and that kind of thing, but respectful behavior is through role modeling. And if you could try to talk to these folks about the importance of role modeling, it kind of puts the focus more on the adult and less on the kid who has to be kind of perfect. So when children observe their parents emulating the kind of behavior we want them to do, have, it's very effective.
Right. I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said for that, because one of the reasons why I feel that way is my children are very, very understanding, and I would say they're advocates for LGBTQ. And it started when they were toddlers, because they would ask questions and I would answer them with age-appropriate answers. And they were raised with this, understanding that, everyone is, just trying to do their best and that we're all equal, and that, we have to support and protect people when they're, the subject of bigotry. And they're huge advocates. I couldn't be more proud of them for the work that they do, because they volunteer and they speak out constantly. And for, they're kind of introverts, my children, so when they do those kinds of things, it makes me very proud. But, I think that there's something to be said for raising your child with that kind of, the ability to speak to your child in again, in an age-appropriate way. You don't ever, put off topics. No topic should be off the table. Mm-hmm. If they ask you questions about sex, if they ask you questions about, homosexual people, if they ask you questions about whatever, if they're asking the question, there's a curiosity that needs to be satisfied. And I wish more parents wouldn't be like, oh, I'll talk to you about that when you're older. That kind of thing needs to disappear, in my opinion. Anyway.
If they're old enough to ask the question, they're old enough for the answer, period. Right. And you just answer the question. Don't go beyond too much, because it's up to them to figure it out, the next question. So
yeah, I definitely didn't, wasn't a perfect parent or anything, but I had some ways that weren't exactly conventional, and my friends were just aghast, because I would answer the questions, and I just wish more parents would be open to. It's kind of interesting what Janet was saying about the way that it's going towards
away from punishment.
Yeah, away from punishment and more towards just being it's almost like positive reinforcement, but not. And I hate positive reinforcement, quote unquote, because people think that that's only rewarding good behavior and ignoring the bad. And so I think that people have a negative attachment to those words. But it's kind of like that. And I would love to see a shift towards making it more natural for people to do those things. I just feel sometimes that we have a long road to climb, a long hill to climb.
I think that what Dale was saying about, as an example, showing disapproval has a big effect. Mm-hmm. I could go into this for years right now, so I'm really going to try to keep it brief. But I think that many parents underestimate the power of just engagement with their child. We as parents very often find it very difficult to express our true feelings to our kids about how things affect us. For example, you talked about, what happens when a child asks a question, say it's about sex or something like that. Well, I can tell you that I was not prepared for those questions, and I was uncomfortable. I was not raised in a household where we discussed any of that. I think the best thing that I did when I first got questions like that was to check in with my feelings of totally being uncomfortable and not knowing how to respond. So I just want to say first that if a parent is just feeling that way, it's okay to answer the question.
No, that's a good point.
You should never make them feel at all that you're disapproving of them asking questions. But if you're not feeling up to answering it right then, it's also okay to say, I'm going to think about that. I need a little bit of time to make sure I just give you a good answer. And so can I get back to you on that?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, and it's even okay to say, this kind of stuff was not something I talked about as a child. No one talked to me about it. I wasn't even allowed to ask it. So I'm, kind of uncomfortable about it. Those kinds of things, when we show a little bit of reality about what we're going through emotionally, has a huge impact on kids. And they're just, I feel it taps into their innate need, or I should say, expression of empathy. And being respectful of others.
So that's a good question, and I need to think about it because I want to give you the best answer I can. And then when you have your fluster level down, go back and say, I had to really think about it, and so forth. It's not easy. This parenting thing, I don't know where the easy part comes in except to love them,
There's a lot to it.
Right? There's a lot to it.
I think because many of us were, I don't want to speak just for myself, of course, but I think that in this country especially, where we have, lost the expanded family, the extended family, and kids are raised in this country very differently than they are in other countries. You take the corporal punishment thing. It's just simply not the go-to in most other parts of the world. So we have, our history
a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, our history is much more from an authoritarian model, and we just, like you're saying, we do have to try to get away from that and keep working at it.
That kind of comes full circle around to the colonial beginnings, where we came from Puritans, where you were told regularly that you were bad and wrong, and your only salvation was to blah, blah, blah. And
the God that we worship is a mean dude who expects perfection.
Yeah.
And
so we've come a long way, baby, as they say.
Do we have just one more minute just for me to say one last thing?
Sure.
Okay. One of the things I kind of stress to parents, especially new parents, is that you want to make sure that the message that you're sending to the child was received as intended. Because sometimes you say things knowing full well what you mean, but that's not what they hear, and that's not what the message that they get is not what what was intended. And so I usually give them one of my former bosses. I call it a Roseism because his name was Jim Rose, who told his story about how his sons were bouncing the ball in the house and knocked over something very expensive of their mother's. And he's like, what was the rule? Rule is bouncing in the house. So go upstairs, get your piggy banks, and we're going to count out the money to replace this. So they did. They came downstairs, they turned over the money to replace it. And he's like, now what did we learn? The kids replied, don't bounce the ball in the house, or, listen to your parents. Don't save your money. So it's very important that they're getting the lesson that you want to get. So I thought he was very smart to ask them, what did we learn, or what did you get from that? And so that's my take-home message to parents is, please make sure the lesson that you're trying to impart is what they're receiving.
Right.
So
That's an excellent story.
Time very much.
Right on. Thank you, Janet, for calling. As always, such a pleasure to talk to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. We have another caller. Shall we go straight into that, lady and gentlemen? Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Hi, you're
I just have a question.
on air? Oh, yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Awesome.
What's your name, if I may ask? I don't have a call screening thing with me right now.
Oh, yeah, I'm Linnea.
Linnea. Okay, what's your question, Linnea?
So my question is basically how would you suggest secular parents go about explaining religious traditions and the respect a lot of people demand for them? Because when I was a kid, I was raised by secular parents, and I went to this, camp in the summer, as kids do, and we were about 13, 14, and this girl had a dead guy speared on a cross around her neck. Now, I didn't know that was a crucifix. Now I know it's a crucifix.
Oh, my.
But I asked her where she got the necklace, and she was like, my mom gave it to me for my 13th birthday. And my response was, because it was a dead guy bleeding around her neck. Oh, that's weird. And she avoided me for the entire rest of the camp. And later I learned what a horrible faux pas I had made in my ignorance of what a crucifix meant. So how do you suggest parents teach their children that some people believe of it? What's the best way that you think that someone like me who is going to also raise her kids in a secular manner should go about, making kids aware of these differences so they maybe don't make the same mistake I did?
Yeah.
Look
at the fantastic story you got out of not knowing, though. I mean, would you deny your child this amazing story? Seriously. Dale, would you like to handle the beginning here?
Sure. I think the approach to this folds in nicely with the approach to diversity generally. I mean, what you want to do is raise children who are respectful of diverse ways of living and diverse traditions and so on in other ways. And there really doesn't have to be a difference between respecting a religious diversity and respecting cultural diversity. That's just they're folded together. You want kids to recognize that the place that the line is drawn is when anyone is asking you to change your behavior or your beliefs or impinging on your freedoms. That's where the line is drawn, and then they're able to say, well, no, if you're requiring me to bow my head or requiring me to give money to your church or whatever it is, that's where the line is drawn. But if someone is, has another expression that doesn't impinge on your rights, then they should really treat it in the same way that they treat other aspects of cultural diversity. And it should be, you can help them recognize that a respectful approach is best. And again, assuming that it also doesn't harm other people, beyond yourself. But if it's just a harmless expression like that, carrying around the dead guy on a stick, then...
I'm sorry, that's so funny.
I'm never going to forget that. That's awesome.
Yep.
But I really think that I think sometimes we try to separate it out from cultural diversity, and it really doesn't need to be. It's a very similar thing. You draw the lines when it is harmful to people. And short of that, it's something that you can respect and allow. And it's interesting, I tried to help my kids understand, to see it as anthropology, to just go, wow, that's really cool. I think I told the story last time. I think I was telling the story of my youngest when she was, 6 or 7 years old in the cafeteria and discovered that her friend was Hindu. And she said, oh, so your family believes the elephant head god. Is that right? And the girl said, yes. And Delaney said, that's so cool. I don't believe any of that stuff. So it was like a two-part thing. That's so cool, and I don't believe any of that, and it was fine. Mm-hmm. Because it wasn't.
That's
she wasn't
awesome.
saying, you will believe the elephant head god. She was able to just sort of say, hey, that's cool anthropology.
I just want to make sure I get this out, that Linnea, your response to seeing that necklace was absolutely appropriate.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's the thing. I'm not worried. I work in a very diverse environment, and that's one of the things that excites me the most is that I'll be able to, I grew up in a very homogenous city, and I'll be able to raise my kids someday around an incredible group of people from very diverse backgrounds. I guess it's just there's some things that are so deeply ingrained into culture, or at least other people's perspectives, that everyone should already know.
Well, yeah, but I think that I understand that you're trying to be protective, but I think that as kids grow up, especially in diverse communities like you're doing with yours, that a lot of that they figure that out so well on their own, and just the message.
It'll happen organically, right?
Yeah, and also when Dale was saying it doesn't have to necessarily be education about, religious people may act this way or that way. I'm sure that you and most parents that are aware parents will be naturally teaching that message that this world is full of all kinds of different folks, and you're going to find that, there are other people that are very different than we are. And I think it, and I think back to how I raised my daughter, none of this was really very structured or thought out. I just was open to her having her experiences, and for her to express herself. And I think then, I don't think she's ever had a situation where she just was made to feel shameful because she said the wrong thing, or, I think that I don't think you have much to be concerned.
I also was raised, I also grew up and went to a strict Catholic school, and if you didn't know the rules, I guess my worry would be should I bother, telling my kids, these are the rules that other people follow? Should I educate them on what the rules are for others? I just don't want them to get, feel left out because they didn't know some bizarre
It's not going to happen if they have you as a parent, honestly. It comes up in all sorts of ways. Like I've said before, and I think I've told this story twice, but it bears repeating. We were stuck in a hotel, nothing to read. I had forgotten our books that we usually read, and I remembered, oh, there's always one book in the hotel room. And we read Genesis together, and it was hilarious because you can go through this and they'll be like, what is this book? And well, this is a holy book that a lot of people believe is the inerrant word of God, and it has all these stories in it, and, they will ask questions. It's going to come up.
Great.
Yeah, you just take opportunities. Driving down the street, Dale has a story about this, about seeing a mosque and going, oh, what's that, etc. The opportunities come up all the time. When my in-law, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, on family vacations, I would always count the churches, because it floored me as a little kid. Like, why are there so many churches in a small town? There's more churches than schools, and it doesn't look like there's enough population to sustain them.
Right.
Why don't people just? It's kids ask those questions.
They're quibbling over one little small thing in each thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think about how difficult it might be for a child that's from a different culture, that's being raised in something really unfamiliar to them. That is the normal. When you think about, what it must be like for a child who, say a child of color, to be growing up in a small all-white community, or a Muslim kid that's in our country and they're not in a Muslim community, they're just, feeling like, just weird or something. And so I think a great lesson from all of this, and what you're thinking about is not so much about, well, let's not make the people that have their own community feel like they're fine, because they probably already do feel fine. I think a great lesson is to look for or spot or learn to recognize children who are actually the other, who are maybe the outcast in some way and not like everybody else, and go up to that child and engage with him or her.
Yeah.
So that I think is even more important to teach kids than to worry about how they may say the right or wrong thing. I think you can't really head off every.
I think we're kind of coming at the same thing, because you're saying, learn to recognize that being different or, not following in with every, single norm.
Yeah, an example of your friend with the necklace was she was not in her community where it's normal to be wearing dead people on crosses around your neck. She was out of her area. And the reason why that was a difficult situation, in my view, is because she was raised in such a way that everyone, that children are made to feel like they have to be this one thing.
Yeah.
That's not a healthy way to raise kids.
No, that's,
Yeah, by the time my kids were
that's a really good way to think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel bad for her almost, because of her having to. Yeah.
By the time my kids were 6 and 7, which is the supposed age of reason in the religion that my in-laws believe, they expressed concern, which is fine. If they weren't concerned about my children, I would think that odd. This is their everlasting soul, and if you don't care about that, why don't you love my kids? So asking this is a perfectly fine thing. But I was able to say to my in-laws, yeah, my kids, I'm teaching them about Jesus and Buddha and any other religion, all the myths of the Greek stuff, so that...
Shoot, I'm so sorry. A motorcycle just went by my house.
Oh, my. Wow. That's fine. It's fine. I was just like, wow, that's impressive how loud that was. So that when they were kind of immunized against any sort of thing that could have been introduced to them. If they had only ever heard about Jesus, they wouldn't be able to make that, have that conversation safely.
I think it's great to do that. My favorite class in Catholic school was world cultures because we actually got to look at other religions. And, we didn't really look at them in depth, but it was, or compare their mythologies to Catholicism, which is kind of disappointing because that's a really great way to take things. But it was a really, really good experience to be like exposed to all these different cultures and their different like moral tales.
Absolutely.
And systems.
I think it's also important, and kids naturally learn this as they get older, that, there's not one code of conduct for one religion.
Right. Right.
As they get older, they're going to learn, wait, there are those people who are of this religion who worship in a much more extreme way. Then there are others in the same religion who are way more liberal. And wait, I can talk to the liberal folks a lot easier, And so they start to create, discover that nuance and what they feel more comfortable being with. Yeah.
Right on. Hope this helped.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, it did. And I'm thinking that maybe, I don't want to call it a mistake, but maybe what would have been good is when I had, like my Greek myths next to my Bible stories, it would have been good to give me a little context that some people actually do believe this when I was a kid. Because my mother is she's a wonderful lady, but she's very tough on what she sees as BS. Let's put it that way. So I was just raised with, that's not true.
Yeah.
And, there's different ways to like, thank you for giving me some advice and like a roadmap.
Yeah, that's why secular parenting is a thing. Giving that roadmap is what we need to do for children who are going to be raised in a very religious world. And if you don't,
So thank you for your question.
Of things. Yeah, it's an excellent question, right? Thank you so much for calling, Linnea.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, you too. Take care. And we have more calls. Can I just, at the risk of having them wait just a couple minutes longer, I want to tell my Thanksgiving memory sort of thing, because I want to tell it as not the last one because it's not a happy thing. For me, Thanksgiving was just one more holiday where my parents put on a great show for people who came to the house. My father was a professor, and he would often invite orphaned students of his, graduate students who didn't have any place to go, and we would all sit around the table all stiff and pretend everything was happy. My father would be very complimentary of my mother's cooking. My mother would be the gracious host, and it was bittersweet for me because it was one of those things where I wished it was like that all the time, and it was real, but it wasn't. So Thanksgiving for me was a very just icky time, and that I get to turn that around as an adult is a wonderful thing. Here's the other thing that I want to say as a message to people who have that sort of Thanksgiving to go home to. You might have a choice there. You might not have to put up with that. You might be able to do your own Thanksgiving thing with friends or people who do feel comfortable to you. Feeling that obligation after you're 18, you don't really have to do it. So there's that.
You have some power.
Yeah, you do. So let's go to our next call, which will be Kara from Central New York, and she has good news regarding teaching comparative religions. Let's see how I did that. Okay. Kara?
Hello?
You're on the air with Janet, Dale, and Claire. You had a question for us?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Kara.
No, I hear so many people calling about not just this show, but the other shows with your organization, where every once in a while there's somebody worried about their kid or their children having a religious parent and their skeptical selves. And I raised 4 children who are now 23, 21, 20, and 16. And it wasn't exactly I taught comparative religion because I didn't like teach a class on it, but I exposed them, like you were just talking about, to everything that I could about religion and tried to keep my opinion out of it as much as possible. And I didn't tell them that I didn't believe in God. Which is a thing to do for an entire childhood for 4 children.
It certainly is.
I probably slipped at some point. Like where we lived, we had limited churches too. I wasn't able to take them to a lot of churches because it was, surprise, all Christian. And I took them to a lot of different denominations. And we attended church on a regular basis at different churches. And without me trying to make any influence on them and telling them that this is wrong, they all ended up as skeptical adults. They're all atheists.
Congratulations.
Also, they're humorously skeptical. Like they're not cranky atheists. They really have a great sense of humor about stuff, and
that's awesome.
They don't exactly laugh at people, but they laugh at the ideas,
sure,
but not in a mean way.
Right.
I'm really glad with how they turned out. They're able to be compassionate to people about what they believe without giving any credence to the beliefs. And I didn't specifically teach any of that. It's just what develops naturally from teaching them, having a bookshelf in the house full of every book on every religion that I could get. And age-appropriate stories. Like when we were learning history, we read about like the creation stories of cultures all over the world. And Christianity was just in there with all the rest of them. And so I hear so many people calling, being worried about what's going to happen, and with patience and a couple of decades, it turned out okay. At least for us, I think 4 out of 4 is pretty good, right?
Congratulations! That's amazing. That's wonderful. I am so glad to hear it. Good stuff.
I hope it gives some hope to people who are worried about their kids going to church and such. But if they just trust the kids to be able to take in all the information and come to their own conclusions eventually, at least they'll be making their own decisions.
I have a question for you, and maybe you just kind of answered it. I was wondering why you felt it was inappropriate or wrong in some way for you to, well, let me ask this. As you and your kids were talking about these different religious customs and beliefs, did they ask you about your beliefs?
I don't remember. We've talked about this together as a family since I've been older, and I cannot remember them ever asking me, what do you think? There were times at certain denominations when they would be in the study class for kids, and they would tell me what they'd been taught, and I would have to say I don't believe that, because it was like at the Seventh-day Adventist, they were told like that certain things that we ate, like catfish, were really, really bad. And they're like, Mommy, they said that we can't eat catfish anymore. And I'm like, oh, shoot, now what do I do? I want to do, I don't, the Old Testament says a whole lot of stuff we're not supposed to do. There's this whole list where that comes from. Do you think all of this we shouldn't do?
I ask that because I think that there are many atheist parents who feel obligated to not share any of their own worldviews or philosophies. They may talk a lot about science, perhaps, but they feel somehow that they're going to be over-influencing their child in some bad way to let them know how they look at the world, and that if it comes up, that they don't believe in supernatural forces and things like that. And I guess I feel like oftentimes, since I wrote this book on religious child abuse, and I've heard many atheists make the statement, any kind of religious teaching is child abuse. There are people that believe that. And what I've often said to that is, it's not so much what you're teaching, it's how you're teaching it. And so when someone, say, is religious, that they have certain religious beliefs, it's perfectly fine for them to be letting their kids know that this is what I believe. The important thing is that you do make it a personal type statement, as opposed to, no, this is true and you have to believe it. That's when it gets exploitive and abusive. So I just wanted to say that I can't think of anything that would be inappropriate or incorrect or wrong to let a child, especially if they're asking, and it sounds like they hadn't posed that question to you, that there's nothing wrong with sharing that.
I didn't think there was anything wrong with telling them. I don't know how bad it's going to sound. It was really experimental, what would, since it's harmless to them, for me to not, if they asked, I would have told them. But we don't remember it coming up ever. And I really wanted to see what would happen if, just given all the information, what they would come to on their own. It wasn't that I thought that saying something would be bad. But also, I was raised myself evangelical, Pentecostal.
So you knew what it was like to have religious messaging shoved down your throat.
I'm probably biased.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally appreciate your valuing the need for them to develop their own beliefs, and that you really wanted to give them that space to do that. So kudos to you.
First, I wanted to see what would happen.
Right.
Dale?
I wanted to see if they would, glom to a certain religion, because like that one was, I like this one. It's got these things in it. I wondered if that would happen, but
right.
Would that all this logic and skepticism and critical thinking that I also taught them just made them. I made monsters, for one, because I couldn't pull anything over on them after a while. I couldn't just say, well, that's what we're doing this because that's what I think is best. And then they would hit me with all these reasons that they came up with why my idea didn't make sense.
Wow. Well done.
Really,
yep.
They would logic me out of, why can't we have the cake for breakfast kind of thing? What difference does it make if we have it now or if we have it after dinner?
Clever.
It makes no sense, does it?
Dale?
Yeah, and it's great to hear you describe it as experimental, because that's parenting. I mean, I feel like it was experimental. Everything I ever did was experimental, and I finally got to the point where I felt like I knew how to parent once I was basically done. Because my kids are exactly the ages of your kids, except I've got three. So I've got 23, one who's about to turn 21, and 16. So we are right on the. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. But yeah, just to sort of underline what Jan was saying. The idea of kudos to you for not wanting to indoctrinate, not wanting to put your kids in a box. One of the things that I recommend people do when they do share what they believe, which you can totally do, is to say, here's what I believe. I think it's true. Other people believe different things. I really want you to talk to people who believe a lot of different things, and then make up your own mind. And I will love you no less for whatever you decide is true. And we had it kind of built into our family, because my wife was Christian for the first half of our marriage. For 13 years, she was identified as a Christian. And so we really got good at that, owning our perspective, each of us. And then saying, I would answer a question when somebody said, hey, did Jesus really come alive after he died? As one of my daughters asked. And I said, well, I don't think so. I think that's a story that was made up to make us feel better about death. But you know what? I know Mom thinks he did. And so you should talk to her about it, see what she thinks. And then you get to make up your own mind. You can change your mind 1,000 times if you want. And I will love you no less based on, whatever you decide. So The other really nice thing about our kids' generation is that they are much more likely to be chill about this, just like you described, that they have a sense of humor. And part of the reason for that is that a lot of their peers are less uptight than ours were when we were kids. The evangelism is less common. It still happens. But my son had a lot of religious peers in high school who he said, it's just no big deal. They don't care if I believe. I don't care what they believe. That's just much more common in this generation. So I think a lot of good things are coming out of that.
Don't. And can I add something else?
Sure.
Please. I didn't hit them. And what the other caller had asked about talking to somebody besides the science on why we don't hit children. I don't. I have people around me who talk about having hit kids, or it's like even now that they do now, like their grandchildren. And I don't think it takes any science to you hit children. You hit children. It's we. He is we. How would you hit for heaven's sake? They are so small. How can you stand yourself?
Right.
How can
that's a really good point.
Behind it. It's a very small person. You wouldn't.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
And it's a really good point. It's a really good point that you actually can't do that to an adult.
That's what I say. We can't hit.
The only people you're allowed to hit are the most defenseless. That's crazy.
It's even illegal in most places to hit a dog.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And most people would not do that. Most people that hit their kids would think it would be bad to hit a dog. It's a lot of this it's still us breaking away from the old ways. And so we're evolving generally speaking, in a good way in that regard too.
It was cool to hear you say that about the no punishment movement, because we did. It was I didn't want to use the words good and bad too often, because their behavior at the time, especially when they're very young, really has no reflection on their character. They're not able to control these things. So it wasn't. People would say oh, is he good? I'm like, he's 2. He's really not able to be good or bad.
Right.
They did, the word tantrum and stuff. So, they would lay on the floor and yell, and I'd be like, whoa, man, you are so angry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow, you are mad. That is some powerful anger.
You're letting them feel that get it, that you are empathetic, and that is the underlying point of the book that I had been recommending, The Happiest Toddler on the Block. It's all about a child feeling that they've been heard, and it does amazing things to their, ability to just feel they can relax, and they just feel like they've got a little more control. That's so similar to how we adults deal with our emotions as well.
Right.
Like Dave said about them, this generation is relaxed. It's just funny. Okay, can I tell you one story? I'll tell you one story. It'll be really fast. The one boy, he was in school. He's 16. He got his folders for school, and he got some ones with kittens and puppies on them. And he went to high school, and people were trying to man, look at him. He's got kittens. What are you doing, man, with the kittens on your folder? And the other kids told me that he had just stood there and was you guys don't like kittens?
Right.
What's wrong with you?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Anyone's sexual orientation has to do with whether or not they like kittens.
Yeah, right? Oh, my gosh.
And that's how they treat everything in their life. They just look at it cold and take it for what it is, and then they're done. They don't carry it around with this burden of, oh no, about so much stuff. They just...
Right. Let's not normalize hating puppies and kittens. Let's normalize loving puppies and kittens. Pretty basic.
Yeah. Well done, Mom.
Thank you for calling.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kara.
Thank you for talking to me. It
Absolutely.
was really fun.
I'm glad you called.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. All right, Dale, you want to tell your Thanksgiving experience?
Oh, sure.
And then we'll take one more call.
Yeah, Thanksgiving for us was cousins. The first thing that I think of is cousins. Our extended family didn't get together on a really regular basis in between the holidays, but at Thanksgiving we would go to a particular aunt and uncle's house. And growing up, I thought they had about 9 kids. I remember thinking that they had more kids than I could possibly name. And then all the other cousins would add in, and we'd run around the basement. There's all that sort of thing. I found out later, I swear I was in my late 20s or whatever, when I found out that they've got 5 kids. All of whom I know, but I had this idea that it was 9 or 11 or, whatever, just more kids than I could wrap my head around. And it was just chaos. I mean, really, it was just a fantastic. Kids were in the basement, and they would shut the door. The adults would shut the door, and we had our world. Oh. So it was really, as a kid, that's what I think about, those particular cousins and the chaos of the basement. It was fun. It was great.
That's awesome. So this is going to be our last caller, and this is Mercy, and she wants to talk about being child-free. All right. Mercy, can you hear us? You're on air?
Yeah.
With Claire,
yeah, hello.
Janet, and Dale. Hi.
Hi. Okay, so I am a person that doesn't think I'm capable of raising a child. Mm-hmm. And it's frustrating because my parents think that I will want kids eventually, but at the same time, they're very strong about me not getting pregnant. Like, it's complicated.
Is it your parents that are telling you that you aren't capable? Who's telling you?
No, I believe that I'm not capable of raising a child, and I don't really want children.
Okay.
May I ask how old you are?
21.
21. Okay.
And how is that a conflict for you? What's causing you stress about that, those feelings? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I feel like I don't really have the skills to raise another human being and to care for someone else.
A lot of people don't.
A lot of people don't.
I certainly didn't when I was 21.
Yeah.
It's perfectly natural to feel that you're not ready for that. Is that like making you feel bad that you don't feel like you're ready to be mom?
It's frustrating because a lot of people expect others to want to have children.
They do. And it's really not their place to put their wants, needs, expectations on you. And you're 21, which means you're your own person. And what your parents want at this point is just nice ideas, or maybe not so nice ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't want to have kids, that really is the end of it, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. That's something that having kids, it changes your life in every direction. It changes your life in that it's good and meaningful and all that sort of thing. But there are also things that you give up. There are things that you will never, will not be the same as they would have been if you didn't have kids. It's a choice that entails a lot of difficulty and a lot of, you said you don't feel that you have the ability to do it. I felt that way every day, even as I'm raising my kids. I'm flabbergasted when people act as if it's a thing that everyone should do. It's a thing that only people who really want to do it and are ready to give up a different path. I'm not saying that you have to give up everything in your life, but there are choices that you have to make when you're a parent that I willingly made, I gladly made because I really wanted to be a dad. I really wanted to be a parent. But if you don't have that desire, there's nothing in the world wrong with that. And it needs to be your decision. I think one of the worst things that anyone can do is become a parent when they don't want to. I really think it's one of the most unfortunate choices a person can make. It's not good for the child. It's not good for the children you're going to have.
You're actually being a really responsible adult by not bringing someone into the world that you're not ready to take responsibility for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you know, I think it's impossible really for anyone to know whether what they're going to do for the first time is something they're going to do well. So there's no way that even your parents, when they had you, could have known that they were capable of being good parents. But what you can know is how you feel about it. So, like Dale, he knew he really wanted a child, and I felt that way, you know, that I would say, actually, I felt like, well, I had my child when I was 41, so the process that I went through was more like, okay, it's now or never. So that's a little bit different. But I do think it is the most responsible thing you could do is to wait until you know you want to have a child. And you may even feel ambivalent about that. But I want to say, too, one more thing about when we are in relationships with people, whether we're their daughters or we're their parents, part of life is disappointing other people because we have to go our own way. So your parents may try to make you feel guilty or bad about whatever. I think that it's okay to let them know, you know, this isn't the path that I'm going to take right now, maybe in the future, and I'm sorry you're disappointed. I don't like to disappoint you. Sorry that that's happening for you.
It's your life.
Don't feel bad about disappointing them because you're making a good choice for yourself.
Well said. Well said. Yeah.
What do you think, Mercy? Has this been helpful to you, or is there something else you feel you want to share?
It's been very helpful. Thank you. Yeah,
and travel while you can if that's something you enjoy, because traveling unfettered by children, wow, I miss it. Not that they're any trouble now. They're old enough that they can take care of themselves, but yeah, do travel if that's something you want, or do all the things that you want to do.
Will you maybe call us back later and just let us know how you're doing for a future show?
Sure.
We'd appreciate it.
Check back with us.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for calling.
Thanks, Mercy. Really appreciate your call. Okay. All righty then. So
I feel like I just would like to sit with that a little bit longer. I don't know what time
go
we
ahead.
have.
No, it's you go, girl.
I feel really, I feel sad for people that are made to feel like they can't be who they are. Mm-hmm. Whether that's because you're not fitting in with some norm, because of your choices, or because of your sexual identity, or whatever it might be. I mean, I think what we've been saying since we started the show, that one of the most important roles we have is to allow our children to be who they are. Mm-hmm. So I think those parents are making a bad choice. They probably don't have much of a understanding of why that's a bad choice, but I wish the best for Mercy, that she's going to be able to make it just stay true to who she is and stay in touch with who she is, because it's her life.
Yeah,
it's not their life.
I was raised by parents who had that sort of parenting style where I was theirs, almost property. And when it came time for me to grow up, leave the house, get married, find my first job, my father was ready to let me go because he knew that was appropriate. My mother said, no, she can't go. She's never going to be, I'm never going to let her go. She's mine. And she lived that. She pushed what she wanted, who she thought I should be, et cetera, and still would today if I were talking with her. So please, if you're a parent, realize that your children are their own persons. And I adore my children, and I would love it if they wanted me in their lives when they grow up. But that's their choice, and if they need to go out into the world and do their thing, please do it. Don't ever let me or your father stand in the way of doing that. The most loving thing I can do is let them be who they are. I had them, and I wanted nothing more than to stay out of their way as much as possible. Let them be who they are.
And, you know, I've loved raising my daughter, but I would never want to make anyone feel like, well, they have to experience that to have a meaningful life.
Yeah.
I remember the last show that you all did, there was a caller that said that she had never had children, and she was trying to deal with feeling like she wasn't fitting in. There was something about that, and I was going to recommend a book called, I think it's called I Kid You Not. And it's actually written by an Austin artist who is in her 60s, and she wrote about what it was like to grow up and become an adult and never have children, and how does she navigate those kinds of things now? Because, you know, it's not right for anyone to feel like they need to do someone else's path. And the one thing, Mercy, if you're still listening, I just wanted to say that a lot of the reason why parents sometimes make kids feel like they have to do what the parents did and make the same choices as the parents, so the parents can feel like their lives were good and they made the right choices for themselves. And sometimes it's covering for them feeling like they didn't make the right choice for themselves, and they just aren't ready to face that. So a lot of times it's really for the parent, it's really not looking out for your interests.
Dale, any last thoughts?
No, that the last thing you said was the thing I was thinking, the whole idea of validation, you know, that the parents are in some cases trying to get a validation of their own choices by having their child make the same choices. And it irritates me. The whole thing about expecting the cultural expectation that people are going to have children, I just think is bizarre. I think it's really unfortunate. It's strange that people actually have to confront that and feel guilty about not making this very challenging choice. You know, they shouldn't feel guilty about going a different way. I just wish that would be less the norm to have that put on them.
It's hard enough being a parent when you want to be a parent. Pile upon that, feeling like you either didn't want to or weren't ready emotionally for it. That's
and there
just
are
a lot.
Communities, most of them religious, that do put pressure on parents to not just have children, but have a lot of children. You know, you look at the Catholic faith or the Mormon faith, and, you know, that is...
Quiverful.
Quiverful movement.
Yeah.
If one of those parents felt like Mercy did, where she just felt like it wasn't right for her, too bad, you know, or, you know, you're gonna lose your whole social network if you go against that norm. It's completely unethical.
Agreed. Well, yes.
I've really gotten to get some of my anger out on this show.
Well,
so thank you all.
You've said some great things. Janet, thank you so much. This was just a wonderful show. And Dale, thank you so much for phoning it in so well.
My pleasure.
All right. And thank you again to Mark and all the people on the other side of this wall over here who put this stuff together for us. We just show up. And thank you to Phil for the amazing graphics. I just love it. And I hope this show helped you a little bit. And I think now it just might be time to go hug your kid. Bye.